It's on?
Yes. I answered some emails.
Okay, should we get started? Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we finished hadith number 14 last time, which I think was like 3 weeks ago was the last time we met, right? We came back from our Umrah trip on Saturday, alhamdulillah. Some people came back Sunday. It was a really great trip. Some of you all were on it with us. I hope everyone's recovering well. Next Monday, I think the building is closed for MLK Day, but I'm not sure if it's actually closed or not. So if you just keep a lookout on your emails. But did we finish reading the article we were looking at, Dr. Jonathan Brown's article, when we were on Hadith 14? And we were talking about the hudud, and in particular, we were looking at an article that talked about apostasy. Am I remembering that right? Yeah, so I think we finished that. So we're going to move into hadith number 15. If people want to pull it up, we're looking at the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah. We've been going through this piece by piece for quite some time now, trying to extrapolate some lessons and meanings from these hadith. And we're going to start a new one this week, hadith number 15, that continues on within the frame of just character and ethics in this section of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. So if somebody wants to read the Arabic and the English, and then we'll kind of jump right into it. Does anybody have it? You could read either or. You don't have to read both. Hadith number 15. Are you looking at me because you want to read? I mean, it's been a few weeks, so, you know.
I'll read it.
Yeah, go.
Authority of Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, said, "Let him who believes in Allah and the last day speak good or keep silent. And let him who believes in Allah and the last day be generous to his neighbor, and let him who believes in Allah and the last day be generous to his guest."
Great, Jazakallah khair. Can somebody read the Arabic? Can I read it?
عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت، ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم جاره، ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So a lot of us have heard this hadith probably, especially like the first part to it. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. And we're going to delve into all three of these things that the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning in particular. The initial framing of this, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر, is an important thing for us to think and reflect upon. The nature of communication from the Prophet is one that is so remarkable that every word that he says has particular meaning to it. And there's not anything that he adds to what is narrated from his companions to us that is superfluous talk, right? Sometimes when we engage in conversation, language can be verbose. We try to get to a point and it takes us a lot of different words to be able to articulate. There's not any instance in the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is speaking to someone and somebody walks away saying, I didn't understand what he was saying, or he didn't understand where I was coming from. And so, in recognizing the communication aspects here, every single word makes a difference. This hadith could have just started with speak good or be silent. It could have just said that you have to do ikram of your neighbor, right? Treat them with honor and dignity, or treat well the guest. It didn't have to preface this with this initial frame, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir, that whoever believes in God and the last day, and then setting these three characteristics that have an intrinsic relationship to this initial frame. And if we buy into this idea that everything that the Prophet ﷺ is saying has meaning to it, that each of these words plays a critical role in being able to highlight and add that much more definition to what it is that the Prophet is seeking to convey in terms of counsel and admonition, advices, then this part to it is important because this part is a framing for all three of the particular actions that then are going to come thereafter. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. In Arabic, when you have the construct of kana and a verb, it's a little bit different from just an action being done once, right? Like you sit, but then you can say, I just sat, and that was it. The kana construct, it denotes something that's habitual. It's happening with regularity, not just something that was done once, but something that was done with consistency. That whosoever is habitually believing in Allah and the last day, then, and then the rest of this hadith. The 14 hadith that we've looked at already, you don't want to understand them in isolation of one another, but how they start to inform your understanding of things that piece together. So the second hadith in this collection, it is the Hadith Jibra'il that we spent a couple of months looking at, that talks about in its different teachings what Iman actually is. May Allah make us people of Iman. And it goes beyond just belief in Allah and the last day. It talks about belief in angels, belief in books, belief in messengers, belief in divine decree. Yet these two are being particularly singled out in the context of now these three advices that are going to come thereafter. It's not just whoever has iman. So when we looked at hadith number 13, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, that not one of you has iman until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. It doesn't specify not one of you has iman in Allah in the last day. It just says not one of you has iman, right? So there's got to be a reason as to why this hadith is particularly mentioning Allah and the last day as it relates to these 3 points that are coming thereafter. Do you get what I mean? And you don't want to gloss over that part because that part is really important for us to build a relationship with. Because when we looked at the Hadith Jibra'il, we looked at the narration that asked the question, Akhbirni an al-Islam first, but we said there's variants of that hadith that ask the question of what is Iman first, because you need to have Iman preceding practice and ritual. So the specificity of these two things is really important. Mentioning Allah and the last day. So I'd like for us to do, just so we kind of get talking a bit, if you've never been to one of our halakas here, we like to discuss and talk to one another. And so the idea isn't that you only speak if you're saying the most correct thing, or you're hesitant in talking because you're worried about saying the wrong thing, but you want to start to think about this, right? We're at a different place now in the room in terms of just capacity. We have maturation that happens organically in a lot of different ways, right? Physically, emotionally, mentally. You don't wear the same clothes as when you were 2 years old. You're not eating the same food as when you were 3 years old, right? Your ability to express yourself or to deal with just life's realities are a lot different. When my children were babies, they would just cry because that's the only way they knew how to express. They're hungry, they're crying. Their diaper needs to be changed, they're crying. They want to go to sleep, they're crying. They only have limited capacity. We've had maturation beyond that. Spiritual maturation doesn't happen in a vacuum as such. It requires a little bit more deliberate of an exertion, and you got to get to a place where you're comfortable actually reflecting and thinking about text that isn't saying, hey, I'm going to extrapolate doctrinal principle or legalistic rulings. This isn't telling us that that's what we're poised to do, but it also isn't assuming at the other end of it that I can't bring my critical thinking capacities into play. So what I like for you to do is turn to the person next to you. I know more people have trickled in. If you don't know people's names, then share some names with the persons you're talking to so we get to know each other. Why do we think that Allah's messenger is mentioning in particular this entire first frame, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir, when he could have just said, speak good or be silent without saying that? And then in particular, why is he mentioning Allah and the last day out of any of the things that he could believe, right? Like he could have said, whoever believes that there are angels, because who's the one writing down the words that you're saying? The angels are on your shoulders writing down all of this stuff. But he didn't mention the angels. He mentioned Allah and the last day. So we can talk about these two things more broadly, why the inclusion of the statement on a whole, and then in particular, why the mention of Allah and the last day as a framing of what's going to come after, and then we'll come back and discuss. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm looking for the things. I noticed that mentions was just sort of like some kind of accountability. You can review that to believe in Allah.
I feel like say, including the part and the last day, I feel like is the greater emphasis on the fact that you will be just to believe in Allah. Believe in God and not believe that they're absolutely
The illumination somehow like was more foundational. Like you know, like if for example were to say like remove for how like saying this should kick in like higher it's like very foundational.
yeah.
Sorry, no.
These are all
It's not enough to say that one explicitly. Also,
then like you're gonna have to like send
I love the Bay Area because like everyone software engineers there.
Why base precisely? Why are you hesitant to say that? You don't like that label?
No, because my job is
Okay.
but the way the thinking is probably is that I'm doing a lot of software engineering, and I think that might work good in ACT what my job is. Whereas as a research scientist, what about you?
Also.
Because 100%. Yeah, your job.
Oh, yeah. My roommate actually is also like
Yeah, a lot of I think of jobs are just writing code in one form or another.
Okay. So, what are some of the things we're discussing? Why do we feel like this is included here? And why, in particular, is there a mention of a belief in Allah in the last day? It could have mentioned a belief in anything. Did you bring something for us? Yeah, great. I don't know, man. It's just your whole plan just got messed up. What are you gonna do? I don't know. There's a table in the back, right? Everybody gets one bite of a donut. What do we discuss? Why do we think this is included? That's not a table, dude. What is that? Oh my god. What do we talk about? Yeah.
We were talking about how so in the beginning it brings up if you believe Allah, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then they should either not speak or say something good. And it's sort of like if you believe in the consequences of your actions, then you should sort of implement the fact that you believe in that. Because if it was just do these things, it's not really providing a basis as to like why you should be doing those things. By saying if you believe in Allah and the fact that you are going to be judged by your actions, then you should act accordingly, that you believe that you're going to be judged on them.
Okay, great. What else? Yeah.
Oh, the mentioning of Allah in the last day. I want to heard from the word when we use the word last, right? In last day. There's a name, like one of the 99 names of Allah is the first and He's also the last thing, right? So everything, even those who believe and also those who don't believe, you will end up in meeting Allah and you will stand on that day before Him. So that's why I think, it gives you a form of a destination that you end up in going to, like, that everything has.
Okay. Other thoughts? I heard everybody talking. What did you guys talk about over here? Maureen, what did you talk about?
I knew you'd call me. I knew it. We talked about when praying, imagining Allah in front of you, and they mentioned that was said at the khutbah on Friday. perspective in mind. It's powerful, to say the least. But yeah, that's what we talk about.
Yeah. The idea of having belief is not so that you just claim it, but is so that you act upon it. This construct is repeated in the Quran again and again, right? Amanu wa amilu salihat, that you have iman and then you act righteously. There's a connection there. But the ability to act in a way that has that mode of acceptability to it is not done through a prism of moral relativism. I don't speak good or be silent because I believe that to be good. I speak good or be silent because my belief in Allah in the last day is informing that to be something that's good. You see? And there's a nuanced difference that's there that doesn't bring me into the picture in an egocentric way, right? I don't believe honesty is simply just good because I think it's good. I also believe it's good because Allah and His Messenger have said that it's good. And understanding that as a foundation is important because it then enables us to accept at a level that could be difficult, but assumes there's going to be struggle in it. That one, I don't have to believe it for it to be true. And two, that some of the things that I do buy into, I'm not going to be able to do with such ease. And you can see it play out in some of what these few things are going to be, because you can understand speaking good or being silent. Who's going to say that that's a problematic thing? But when we get to these other places about treating your neighbor well or treating a guest well, in our tradition, a neighbor is somebody who's 40 homes in every direction from you, right? And it's just objective reflection. Do you know the names of the people that live next door to you? But if the basis is rooted in what I feel is fine and is not rooted in what Allah and His Messenger are telling me is good, then my expectation of myself is not going to necessarily push myself to a place that is going to get it done. And then the added variable of an accountability, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to have to explain to God why you did it that way, or why you chose not to do it in the ways that you could have gotten it done. Can we move up a bit? As people are coming in, and we want to make room for everybody. And so to claim a belief in something, but to not act on that belief, one can say that there's some type of discrepancy or even a negative that's rooted in that. Like, why would I not act on my belief that I'm claiming I have? And everything is going to go back to these two things. So you have belief in Allah that's an entry point into Islam. An entry point into Islam is not that you're born to Muslim parents. One could argue that, yes, that could be an access point, but a sociological identity variable that you inherit is different than buying into the idea and the statement of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. May Allah make us people of La ilaha illallah. Understanding this, though, like that's what is the entry point to this. A belief in Allah. And out of everything else that comes up, the last thing that you're going to experience is a last day, right? So it encompasses an entire spectrum experientially of what belief can be for a Muslim, that you don't become Muslim unless you believe in Allah. And then the last thing that you're going to actually engage in a tangible way is going to be the day you stand in front of the divine. May Allah make it a day of ease for us. The Ghana construct is important because it's not just something that's done in a room like this. I'm not only a believer in Islam when I come into a prayer room, but the whole idea is that I carry Iman with me. I might pray here, but it's supposed to inform and be transformative so that out there I still have Iman. And what's interesting about this hadith and the hadith that we looked at prior to and the hadith that we'll continue to look at, because the next hadith is on anger, they're giving us a sense of whoever has this belief. That doesn't mean if you don't do these three things, you are devoid of Iman. This is what we said in the hadith, two hadith before. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That not one of you has complete Iman until he loves for people what he loves for himself. So here too, like if you want to have complete Iman, which is something you should want to have, then you want to be somebody who does these three things. But the Iman component is meant to inform the behavior. The action component is meant to be what it is that is informed by actual conviction. I'm not doing it just because I think it's good. I'm doing it because it's informed by a belief in something that's bigger than my own sense of moral relativism. Does that make sense? And the Prophet could have mentioned anything else. Whoever believes in Allah's book, whoever believes in Allah's angels, whoever believes in Allah's messengers. But he's mentioning with specificity. If you really believe in God and you believe you're going to stand in front of God one day, then everything else in this hadith is about how you treat humanity on a whole. No qualifications, no conditions whatsoever. Just how it is for a person who has consistent belief in Allah in the last day, what that would fundamentally look like. And it's not then just about practice that is done as a set of postures performatively, but if I want to have metrics of assessment, if this thing is actually impacting, I pray my prayer and I prostrate, is it yielding some type of benefit? Well, this hadith is telling you that if it's actually strengthening the iman in your heart, that prayer that you're praying, then you're not going to treat people poorly, but you're also going to treat people pretty good. And if you get to a place where there's qualifications or conditions, the 13th hadith that we looked at different variations of it. Some of that included the word jar, your neighbor. Some of it included the word nas, like humanity. This is why Imam Nawawi, whose book we're looking at, he says the word brother in that hadith is in reference to your brother, not just in faith, but your brother in humanity. Some people would say that hadith is only in reference to your brother in faith. There are two opinions that are on it, and that's fine. Nobody says this hadith is only about Muslims treating Muslims a certain way. This hadith is just about treating people a certain way. Your neighbors are not all Muslims. Guests in your homes are not going to just be Muslims. The people that you speak to, they're not just going to be Muslims. You talk to people all the time. You engage with people all the time. You speak with people and interact with people. There's a hadith that is very small, 2 words, adinul mu'amalat, that the religion is how you interact with others. Right? There's 2 broader categories when we look at things. Ibadat, like how we worship Allah. Mu'amalat, how it is that we kind of engage with everything else. And this hadith is saying the religion is how you engage with everything else. And how you engage with everything else still has to be informed by this. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, that whosoever is habitually believing in Allah and the last day, and then the next few things are going to be what that person should be doing or could be doing or striving to doing, or is indicative of the fact that they believe in Allah and the last day. May Allah make us from amongst those who believe in Him and in the last day, but with consistency. And that consistency variable is going to be important, not just in Ramadan, not just when I'm in Mecca and Medina, not just when I'm on Hajj or Umrah, not just when I'm at home with people or with my friends or any place else. Where I strive is to have informed behavior through Iman in Allah and the last day, and everything else that comes in between. Does this make sense? If you have capacity to have action be informed by belief in Allah and the last day, that means you can also have action be informed by belief in something else. And being able to distill how it is that I can habitually believe in something requires me to first know, how do I determine what I believe in the first place? How do I know what I have iman in? How do I know what I actually have faith in? What I put my conviction and trust in? How do I know? How do I begin to determine how my belief structure is actually formulated and where it kicks in instinctively or consciously? But it's still something that is there, because there's certain things that become constants that I'm just running off of, right? There's a lot of people who believe money is the most important thing in the world. And they're constantly striving to get more and more and more of it. Our religion is not against the acquisition of wealth. Our religion is against the acquisition of wealth in an unhealthy way. It's not against wealth, it's against the love of wealth. Do you understand? Those are two totally different things. But you have ways of determining, like, how do I even begin to know what it is that I believe in with consistency? It's very different to be in a place where you come and something just kind of gets you going. Do you know? But whether I'm at my highest in the celebration of an achievement, or I'm at my lowest and I'm going through difficulty and tragedy, or anything in between, I want to be in a place where I'm informed through Iman in what is going to bring me benefit. And beliefs in other things that I make absolutely true, but they're not fundamentally true as an absolute. And they still inform my behaviors and my actions in certain ways. I got to start to figure that out. So, what I'd like for you to do is turn to the person next to you. What helps me to have consistent Iman in what Islam is telling me to have consistent Iman in? And think about when you've experienced certain things, when like your inner self is just on a rush, it's on a high. The people that you're around, you have good company, it's Ramadan, you're fasting. Like, I'm throwing out theoreticals so you can start to think about it. When is it different? When you're reading Quran or you're not reading Quran, right? You're consuming certain things, you're not consuming certain things. Some of us just went for Umrah and we came back. The idea is not to treat it as a bubble, but to think about how you're eating, who you're eating with, the quality of your food, what you're consuming visually, what you're hearing, like all of these things, they are going to be synthesized by your heart and they're going to bear impact, right? So, what is it that can enable me to have a little bit more consistency in it? So it's not something that I just leave behind. And how do I begin to craft out, like, what do I believe in the first place? Not at a theoretical. Anybody can spit out creed at a codified level, regurgitated. We can sit here and say, Muslims believe that there is only one God. How do you know that you believe that there's only one God? We can say all kinds of things that exist at the level of a codified creedal system that we memorize. Aqidah is different from Iman. How do you build iman in something? You can't have an iman in something that is consistent if you don't know what you have iman in to begin with. Do you get what I mean? So we can talk about these two things for a little bit, right? How do I know what I have iman in to begin with? And how does it build itself up consistently? And you want to be vulnerable with yourself, but understand that you do believe in certain things, and some of those things, they do inform at a greater level than other things. How did that happen? If you can understand the process that makes something a consistent, regular, then it can now be something that you parallel to make these things what are the regular things. Do you get what I mean? Let's turn to the person next to us. How do I begin to determine what I have iman in to begin with? How do I begin to determine what my beliefs are? And then second, how do I build those with consistency, right? I want to have a consistent belief in Allah on the last day. Because with the first thing we're going to talk about, right? فَلْيَكُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, that you speak good or be silent. You know you say dumb things all the time. Do you know what I mean? Right? Everybody says stupid things all the time. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he used to put a pebble in his mouth that necessitated him having to remove the rock from his mouth before he spoke so that he could be sure that what he was about to say was like a good thing to say. Do you know? And this is a man who, within our understanding, if you put his iman on one side of a scale and the iman of the entire ummah on the other scale, Abu Bakr's iman would outweigh. And he was still worried about the words that were coming out of his mouth. Do you know? And you got all kinds of mechanisms that you don't want to think at a level that is like cliche or lacking substance. You can put more words into existence then more people can read than anybody before because of technology and all kinds of stuff. And you got to really ponder upon that. Do you know? So I want to have this thing as a safety valve that's saying, hold on a second, I shouldn't be talking to people like this. But how do I get to that point? The iman is going to inform the behavior. So let's talk about these two things. How do I know what I have belief in the first place? And how is it built up with consistency, belief? And we'll come back and discuss, but go ahead.
Like, it's, so I just probably feel like the difference or like stuff like this or she's I can slip into like station this prayer not having like very dedicated a lot of time and like a lot of doubts not easy getting up like the dua getting reading so like I feel like habits in general I know what the his phone was just random every 10 minutes. I'm just trying to say, or like a different. And I'm sure that he was I thought it was just no, it was go. Yeah, it's very weird. Like Muslims from poor countries, there's plenty of availability for you to stay on track. There's just as much availability for you. Because like, it's funny. Because like over there, it's like the fault is that you're Muslim. That like so like people aren't worried and like aren't as focused on like making sure that like you build the house. So it's like that. Like here, there's a lot more focus. Like if you are not focus on so you often find like reverts here will often have like a stronger hold. Yeah.
Okay. So how do we know? How do we begin to ascertain what I believe in the first place? And how do I build a consistency in some of these things? Yeah.
Your actions match your stated belief. Your actions match what you say. So it's, if you're one of the examples is if you're able to pray fairly consistently, it's a sign of like, to my estimation, it's a sign of like good high iman and or in that realm. And if it's not, then your iman's kind of low at that point. Or you have an outward identity where there's you see yourself as a practicing Muslim. I think that's a sign of iman outside of like you mentioned, outside of like the masjid or outside of your home.
Okay. What else? Yeah.
So for me, consistency can be like renewing your intention every time you pray something. So in this Umrah, when I was just reflecting upon like, there are like a lot of local people who goes to the Masjid al-Haram and then pray all the five prayers, right? And then they get like, I think like one rakat is like 1,000, 100,000 rakats, right? So I was thinking that when I was there, that how lucky these people are who can pray 5 times over there. So I made a dua that in Allah, like when I go back, and then when I have to pray in the closet, when I have to pray in a staircase or something, when I'm like taking classes or whatever, I like talk to myself that every time I'll pray, when the Kaaba is not in front of me directly, that Allah like accept my prayer as if like I'm praying in front of the Kaaba. So give me the reward of like praying as I'm like praying in Masjid al-Haram, right? So that kind of intention, that kind of like it's kind of like healthy jealousy with your Muslim brothers, that I also want to compete in the level as if like I'm situated around the Mecca. So it kind of like helps me bring like consistency as well. Like I want to compete with the Muslims. Like I don't want to, like I also want like be ahead in the race. So that can help me like or at least like I'm getting the headspace. So what, I have to kind of like pray on time. And if I'm gonna be making that intention, if Allah wants to give me the reward, I also have to put in the effort for it. So that kind of like kind of like making me into that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts?
Said that what initially helped identify what our belief system or value system was being around things that just felt viscerally wrong and unnatural. And we had to know that's like, this doesn't feel right. So the opposite of this is what we actually believe in.
Okay. Yeah, good. Anything else?
Patience. Patience is also one of the important factors to keep it consistent in our iman.
Yeah. If you grew up in this country, or pretty much any country in the world at this point, right? Supremacy is a globalized phenomenon. It purposely seeks to create psychological shackling. You go through systems and structures that teach you certain things that are informing now core belief structures. Whether you consciously affirm them or not, they influence behavior. Why do you study as hard as you study? Why don't you give yourself permission to rest? Why do you think you're inadequate if you're not married? Why do you look down upon people who don't have money? Why do you judge people based off of their accent, the color of their skin, their country of origin? I'm not saying this in a way that's accusatory. I'm asking you to think, why do you believe the things that you believe? You don't have to have a consciously formulated curriculum that influences now how it is that you perceive the world around you. Your socialization is going to play a role in informing how it is that you make sense of realities, and you have core beliefs that affirm themselves through the mode of processing information that's synthesized through that core belief structure. And a lot of the places that you frequented from the time that you can remember your earliest memory, they just don't talk about God in the last day. When you go into your office, do they say, we're going to make this decision because one day we're going to stand in front of God? When you go into a classroom, do they say, today we're going to study this because it's pleasing to God? I'm not saying that as a good or a bad. I'm saying it as a reality. The majority of spaces that most of us frequent in this room are spaces where there is not mention, and there is also deliberately the absence. So a secularity that both makes spaces and conversations devoid of Allah in the sense of discussions, as well as devoid of an understanding that there's anything beyond this world. And there's a beauty that 14 centuries ago, our prophet is talking to inform the people of his community. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh is narrating this hadith. We didn't go into his biography because we talked about it when we looked at the 9th hadith of this collection. But he is somebody who is of the Ashab as-Sufa. He's like sleeping and living on the doorstep of the Prophet's house in Medina. He's a prolific narrator of hadith and a lot of other things that are going on there. But even in these places that are beyond a Meccan reality, the Prophet is still reiterating these foundational theologies. Believe in God and the last day. Believe in God and the last day. Believe in God and the last day. But he also isn't just throwing it out randomly. He's given them an education on who the God of Islam is and what the concept of a last day actually means. If I passed out sheets of paper to each of you, and at the top of it we wrote, "Who is Allah to me?" and we wrote, "What is the last day?" all of us likely would have different things written. Some of us wouldn't even know what to write. Not because we don't know, but nobody's ever asked us this question before, and we've never reflected upon it before. How can you believe in something that you've never thought about? And this is an important part to this hadith because it's going to get attached to actions that can only be things that are done consistently if there is a conscious exertion of belief informing an action, and you live in a world that benefits from you not knowing what you believe in. And it seeks to control your belief structure and makes you believe in ideas that fundamentally just don't find presence in our religion the same exact way. Our religion teaches us that both the wealthy and the poor can have access to the divine. Belief systems in supremacist societies have us believe certain things about poor people and have us believe certain things about rich people. It's just what it is. It's true. You know it's true. But why do you buy into that same belief structure? What gets you to a place where it's consistently informing your practice? The best of your energy, the best of your strength, the best of your skills, the utilization of your spiritual gifts and talents. They're in pursuit of the acquisition of what exactly? And when you look at these next few things that are mentioned in the hadith, like Allah didn't give you the ability to speak so that you would retreat into a place that's animalistic. If He wanted you to bark like a dog, He would have made you a dog. But He made you human. And what allows for you to get to the epitome of being human is man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. And when you forget it or it's not present, it then allows for us to act contrary to that. I'm going to only speak good to certain people, and to other people, I would justify talking to them like garbage. The ikram of the guest, there's only going to be certain people who are allowed in my house. Other people, they're not allowed in my house. And I'll get upset if you bring home somebody who I don't think should have presence in my house. How can you bring somebody into my home? You are my child. You should not be friends with someone who comes from this race or culture. Muslims are supposed to be different from other people, and you have to be willing to embrace your differenceness in a way that's empowering, not condescending of anybody, but you should want to be the person who actually takes care of their neighbor. Who taught you Islam like that? That your iman is not complete if your stomach is full but your neighbor's is empty. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. My stomach is going to be something that speaks on the day of judgment. Every one of my limbs is going to speak and say something. What is informing behavior? What is informing action? What is informing my tendencies? And if you don't design your life, someone else will design it for you. And in a world that relishes you living on default settings, acting unconsciously, right? How many times do you say stuff that later on you're like, man, I wasn't in control of what I was saying, but it's still coming from someplace. And to get to a place where it starts to be habituated, you got to first get to a place where you can understand, like, well, what actually is a day of judgment? What actually is a last day? What actually is a final hour that I will experience? Ours is not a morbid theology. We have a belief in death as a means to which we transition from this world to the next world. May Allah make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds, and let not any one of us leave this world other than in a state that's most pleasing to Him. You sit down and you look at your choices. If you believe that honesty is good, why do you lie so much? If you believe that gossiping is bad, why do you do it so much? Some of it is not as simple as it might sound, but some of it actually also is. And if I sat down and I reflected, just contemplated, do I buy into this thing or not? And not at an outward level, but at an inward level. And through sound reflection, I start to think, like, who is the Allah that I believe Allah to be? What is this last day? What is a day of reckoning, accounting, a day of judgment, where every single thing is going to be shown to me? Let's open up the 50th chapter of the Quran. It's 17th verse, Surah Al-Qaf. 50:17. Does anybody have it? You want to read it? English or Arabic? Or both? It would be great. Yeah, go ahead.
As the two reporting angels, one sitting to the right and the other to the left, in the heaven, not a word.
Yeah, sure.
Not a word does a person utter without having a vigilant observer ready to write it down.
Yeah, you can stop there. Right? Everything. There are different understandings of what everything means. Right? Some people would say if you're just blinking unconsciously, an angel is not writing that down. Do you know? And some people would say, like, even that, right? Khalid waved his hands and the halakha. Do you know? Like, everything is being written down. Everything. There's not a word that anyone is going to utter that is not being written down. Can somebody read the Arabic of these two verses, 17 and 18? Yeah, go ahead.
إذ يتلقى المتلقيان عن اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد.
Jazakallah khair. You want to start to look at some of these verses because what's going to inform belief is going to be like what the book says is what we believe in, right? So if you don't read the Quran, you're not going to necessarily know fully what the Quran says. How can you ponder on the book that you don't read? And you can't look at this in a self-deprecating mode. You just got to be able to sometimes step up to it objectively. And somebody's going to always turn it into something else that won't necessarily be for you what it could be if you just read it yourself. Uh, let's open up the 9th chapter, verse 38. This is Surah Tawbah, verse 38. Can somebody read it? Just the 38th verse. In the English or the Arabic?
I think Arabic again.
Yeah, go ahead, man. You're on a roll. Don't stop now.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا ما لكم إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله اثاقلتم إلى الأرض أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة فما متاع حياة الدنيا في الآخرة إلا قليل.
Somebody read the English? You want to read it again? Okay.
O believers, what is the matter with you that when you are asked to march forth in the cause of Allah, you cling firmly to your land? Do you prefer the life of this world over hereafter? The enjoyment of this worldly life is insignificant compared to that of hereafter.
Right. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu is how the verse is started. It's making a distinction from Ya ayyuhannas, like, oh humanity. Other people, they can behave in a way where all they understand is this world. You are supposed to be a mu'min. Why are you behaving like there's no world after this one? What's going on? And the verse is telling you that it's not saying that there's not like good in this world, but it's pales in comparison to what the hereafter is. So for something paltry like the dunya, for a moment, you're going to do what exactly in relation to what comes after? But for it to resonate, I have to think out, like, how did I learn what this is to begin with? The entry point in Islam is not up here, it's down here purposefully. You don't have to have a detailed understanding of theological doctrine. You can have a very entry level understanding of it, and that can suffice. But to get to a place where you are not in the places that some people live, like a lot of us in this room were just in Medina and Mecca, right? It's not that there's not challenges in Medina, Mecca. There are challenges everywhere, but it's a lot different when the adhan is being called in your hotel room. It's a lot different when everybody is walking to the masjid. It's a lot different when everybody's dressed a certain way, like the food is what it is. It's a lot different, right? You're in a place where a lot of you are the only Muslim that is in the spaces you frequent throughout the course of your days. And then the Muslims that you sometimes interact with, they're not so nice. It'll be that much harder at that point that your iman is not influencing something. You want to know how you still have iman? This is where it goes back to the idea that it's not the same as other people. I used this example before where I was at a retreat in New Mexico that Sheikh Dawood Yassin and I co-lead in August. You all should come. It's a really nice place. Some of you have come, right? We went swimming in a lake, or I watched you swim in a lake. I did not swim. And he was having a lot of fun in that lake. So,
You said I look like a kid from your gown.
huh?
You said I look like one of your friends from your gown.
I mean, I'm not going to say what you were wearing in that lake, man. But, you know, you definitely look like a kid that was playing in a puddle of some kind. So, and there was a brother who, towards the end of the retreat, he said to me, like, some nice things about, you know, you did this for us post 9/11, et cetera, et cetera. But he was saying it in a way to say, I wish I had as much iman as you. And he said, I go into my office and I look for an empty room to pray in, and I just try to pray as quickly as I can because I don't know who's going to catch me doing what. And I said, I appreciate like the compliments, but understand my job is to be Muslim. My office is at the end of this hall. What excuse do I have to not pray my prayers? There's a wudu room in between. The fact that you are the only Muslim in your space and it is hostile to Muslims, and you're still praying your prayer, not because you worship a feeling, but because Allah is telling you to pray your prayer, that's a sign of strong Iman, not a sign of weak Iman. Do you get what I mean? The ajr is in the struggle. But they're going to want to take that belief away from you. That's what makes you Muslim. What makes you Muslim is not that you just pray prayers 5 times a day. What makes you Muslim is that you pray those prayers because Allah and His Messenger told you to pray those prayers. You see the difference? And people are going to want to strip you away from that belief because it's the only thing that creates a moral consciousness in a world that every single day is showing how it's embracing depravity more and more. And not in judgmental ways where you could go walk on Astor Place and try to look down at people. That's not the way of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm talking about people who wake up every single morning and they find joy in killing children. They literally sign off on bills that are going to keep people from being able to afford basic medical treatments. They don't want you to come with a belief in Allah on the last day, because then you get to a place where it can create courage, and having a moral courage in a world that builds cowardice in people because it tells them if you do this, you're going to lose some part of the dunya. And you look back at this world and this verse and you say, but it's going to be pale in comparison to what comes thereafter. Do I buy into it? Do I believe it? And all of that and so much more is then what is going to be evidence through these 3 characteristics that the hadith is talking about. فَلْيَكُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, that you speak good or you be silent, that you honor the neighbor, you honor the guests. But it's informed by something. It's not just done because so-and-so told me to. The basis of it is building a belief system in what it is that is going to render that benefit consequently. And it's not going to happen with a struggle. Yeah, 100%. I believe in Allah on the last day, so I am going to welcome guests in my house. I am going to be worried about the state that my neighbor is in. I'm going to be mindful about the words that come out of my mouth. I want to get to a place where I start to think about it through a mode of empowerment, a mode of bringing contentment. Do you think the person who is speaking well or being silent has distress in their heart if it's being informed by Allah on the last day? The person who lives in such a way that they actually have a worry about their neighbor, not in a way that intellectualizes struggles and then doesn't act in some place, right? There's a difference between somebody saying, man, I can't believe the administration of this city is doing this and that to these migrants. Yeah, that's fine. And you can sit and talk about it with your friends. Why aren't you going and giving them blankets? And it's not a judgmental question, but the belief system is going to bring you to a place where you take that next step. Do you see? And do you see why people would not want you to believe in this way? They want you to think poorly of the poor. They want you to think that somehow you deserve the food that you have or the heat that you have. I walked here from 23rd Street and 3rd Avenue. I don't know why I did that. And on the way, I got a smoothie that was really cold, and I'm holding this thing in my hand, and I'm drinking it, and every so often I stop and I stick my hand in my pocket, and then I take it back out again. It was cold. There's people living in that cold. They want you to be a part of gentrification. They want you to think it's amazing that you get a home at such a deal and not care about the black and brown people that have lived there for generations that you're playing a role in pushing out. And the belief is important for you more than anyone, because all these people are going to come on the day of judgment, man. Everybody who you did not speak khair to, and you chose to not be silent when you were not speaking khair. The neighbors that you did not think about and do right by. The guests that came and you did not honor them. All of them are going to have their due right restored on that day. May Allah make it easy for us. The Prophet is instilling within his companions, don't forget these things. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir. Whosoever believes in Allah in the last day. Whosoever is habitually, consistently, with regularity. Don't just be Muslim in this room, be Muslim out there. Don't just be Muslim in name, be Muslim in reality. And to be a person who follows this religion, there are foundational beliefs that then inform practice, beliefs that then help us to understand ethics and values through their prism of existence, belief that is meant to then create for us a sense of spiritual gain that is not just done in a vacuum, but it is done in a way that everything comes back to God in this religion. You got to go home tonight and at some point this week, and every so often, who is the God that I believe in? If you want some starting points, well, let's do this before we do that. You can turn to the person next to you, because I just talked for a long chunk of time. What are you taking away so far from this conversation? What is it bringing up for you? Let's talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. If you don't know the names of the people you're talking to, share some names, and try to bring people into your conversation who might be sitting by themselves.
For me, it's sort of
Okay, what are some of the things we're taking away so far? What's coming up for people? Who wants to start? Yeah.
So looking back at chapter 9, verse 38, about how, oh, you believers, why are you so focused on this dunya when you know there's an afterlife? It's reminding me of back on October 7th when everything started to kick off. I'm in law school right now, so hearing you're going to get blacklisted, you're never going to have a career, you're never going to have anything, and letting that type of fear sort of control, okay, well, how do I move? How do I protest? How do I become an activist? Do I cover my face? Do I wear the Palestinian kufiya everywhere? And realizing, I'm a Muslim and I have Allah as my sustainer and my protector. And there's nothing that someone else can do to me that will really matter in this life. And moving in a certain way that is with confidence and with full trust in Allah that everything is going to be okay.
Yeah. The verse, right? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ma lakum. When it says ma lakum, it's essentially saying, like, what's wrong with you? Right? Like, what is going on with you? Right? إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله أثقلتم إلى الأرض. أثقلتم إلى الأرض means like you're stuck in the world, like you're stuck in the dunya. Do you know? What's going on? What brings you to that place? But what's important to understand in this framing, right? It's a subjective understanding what my individual capacity is. The nature of this hadith is telling us, Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir, that whosoever believes in Allah on the last day will be able to recognize that even in the response to something situationally as being described, people will have different capacities to engage it. And the one who believes in Allah on the last day is not going to say to someone, because I can do this, you must have to do it the same exact way. There were companions who came to the Prophet and gave all of their wealth to the Prophet of God. There was companions who came and tried to give a lot of wealth, and the Prophet said, take it back. You're not going to be able to handle it. That doesn't mean that there's better or worse. People recognizing capacities individually, and my ability to find courage and strength through my faith sometimes understands why, when we go back to the beginning of this conversation, that circumstances aren't going to always allow for people to act fully in the ways that they want to in relation to their belief because of just how suffocating systems are. So when the hadith tells us that towards the end of time, holding on to a sunnah is going to be like holding on to a burning coal, that's a reality. And you think about where divisiveness comes in. Yeah, there's people who don't do what they have the ability to do. But there's also a lot of us who, not knowing what to do, we waste our energy in trying to figure out why somebody else isn't doing something and getting to a place where we don't recognize everybody is not built the same way as everybody else. Do you get what I mean? It's not going to always look a certain way, but I can still be attuned to my belief and be real with myself. How much of what it is that I'm engaging in is informed through a reality that the akhirah is better than this dunya, and how much of what it is informed through a belief that this dunya is all that there is. Do you see? What else did we talk about? What else did we discuss? What are we taking away so far? Are you like semi-raising your hand? What did you guys discuss? You can pass it on to one of the people in your group if you don't want to.
We just discussed, like, okay, who was he talking to? Wait.
Yeah, I'm talking to you. But you could talk too. You could both talk. She doesn't look like she wants to talk, so watch. Go ahead. I was talking to her.
Oh, sorry, my fault. Let's just kind of just talk about, despite the lack of efforts of, obtain, like not obtaining, but like doing what Allah has told us to do and obligations to Him and our faith and Iman. Like, despite how hard it is to kind of just push ourselves as best as we can to like be at least of a certain level. That way, it's how do I explain this? I'm not really good at being put on blast.
Okay, so like we kind of talked about also when you mentioned just like even if like not everybody wants to make their salah all the time, but it's what makes you strong in your iman is doing it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you to do it. And so we were just saying how like these are the things that I feel like makes you or like strengthens your iman is just having the discipline to want to make your iman stronger. So like having that discipline is what's gonna I guess progress you as you like are growing in your faith.
Yeah, great. And don't attach it just to ritual practice. Do you know? It's not just about my iman translates into salah, right? Like, yeah, pray your 5 prayers. Don't walk away from here being like, that guy said, I don't have to pray my 5 prayers. That's not what I'm saying. But that's not what the equation is. Do you see? You find solace in the fact that the theologies inform one another. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. Why can that person go and speak good or be silent? Why can they go and honor the neighbor and honor the guest? Because they don't exist separated from one another, the theologies. They have overlap, meaning like Allah and the last day, when you see these together, there's nothing that Allah is not witnessing. And you can find solace in your heart that even when things are tough, I know my God is watching this. And as crazy as this world feels, none of it makes sense without a belief in an afterlife and a day of judgment. And that same Allah that I believe in, He is the master of that day of judgment, and He's going to put everything into balance. Somebody said to me earlier today that somebody told them that if you are a survivor of abuse, then you should be patient the way Asiya was patient with Fir'aun, and the abused should just take the abuse from the abuser because that's what her example was. That is the most ridiculous thing in the world to say, especially to somebody who's being abused. What Asiya knows as she is shackled in an abusive relationship is that her God sees all of it. He is witnessing all of it. And there is going to be a day of judgment where everything is put into balance. And so how can I get to a place in a world that's so heavy where I digest and consume all of these things that are so tragic in the world, and I'm still taking care of my neighbor, and I'm still doing right by my guests, and I'm still speaking good or being silent, because the theology is what yields contentment. It doesn't make it devoid of sadness. You can still be sad and be content. You can still be anxious and be content. You can be happy and be content. Contentment is about an inward state of balance. I'm going to just take care of what I need to take care of. I know my God, who is going to be in charge of that last day. He's going to put everything in balance the way that he has promised. So I just got to get done what I have the ability to get done. And when I can take these two theologies and put them together and let them be something that I revisit again and again and again, it's going to be a little bit easier to speak good words in a world that is ever increasing in its darkness. It's going to be a little bit easier to take care of a neighbor at a time when so much of the world is just thinking about taking care of themselves. It's going to be a little bit easier to think about how it is that I create moments where guests come together in my home and I honor their rights. Because I know the world is heavy and people need spaces to be in where they don't need validation to just be who they are. And I'm willing to give up a little bit out of figuring out that true honor comes from honoring others and not demanding it for myself. And why? Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir. I believe in Allah in the last day, and not as separate theologies conceptually, but the beliefs overlap. And I know that that God I claim a belief in, he is going to put everything into balance on that day of judgment. And then I find solace in the fact that Allah is seeing this and witnessing this. And I know that his promise is true. Do you see? When we get into the three categories that we're going to discuss, this framing is going to be really important because we're not just exerting an action based off of an idea that it is good in a way that exists in a vacuum. It is informed by this belief. And I want to get to a place where I start to build that. If you want to start to deepen in a relationship with the divine, in a generic sense, like it's hard to just throw things out, but some steps that could be helpful that we've discussed before in different halaqat. One, like you got to read Allah's book and read about who he is through his words. And an entry point to this is taking a deep look into Allah's divine names and attributes that he defines and identifies himself by. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Arham Ar-Rahimin, Khairur Rahimin. Like the Quran mentions all of these things. What does it mean that Allah is Rahman? What does it mean that he's Rahim? You could go online and do a search on any of these names, the 99 names, the beautiful names, the names of Allah, and you'll find entire classes that are written on these things. There's a lot of books that you can read on this as well. That's step number one. Step number two, you take a few minutes as you're walking through the world and you see, how does this actualize in the world? Where did I see rahmah today? Where did I experience it in front of me? And it's there. You just got to take a pause to look. A third, تخلقوا بأخلاق الله, that you want to embody the characteristics of the divine, that you can, right? So if we know that God is good and God is merciful, then we know that being merciful is good. And this is why you want to know what rahmah means, because it's not mercy the way that we understand mercy to be in inequitous systems that surround us. Rahmah has its own element of compassion, its own element of love, its own element of softness and kindness, and its own element of mercy all together. It's not just mercy. I went through a red light, a cop stopped me, I asked him to be merciful to me. That's not just the way that it is. Do you see? There's certain things you cannot do. Allah is al-Khaliq. You cannot create something from nothing. But you can manifest these things in your life at a human level. And then the fourth, whatever that divine name is that you are trying to understand, open up a notebook and write a dua to Allah invoking that name. Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, and then write out what that prayer would be. What's the prayer that you would write out if you're calling Allah as Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of judgment? Al-Muntakim, the avenger. What would that be? Al-Jabbar, Al-Qahar, Al-Latif, Al-Wadud. And how do you understand this in the context of what Haris is saying? All of them have eternal beginninglessness. Before there was anything, there is Allah. After there is nothing, there is Allah. And who he defines himself to be for our capacities to understand, recognizing that he does not become these things through the exertion of action. Even if Allah didn't create anything, he would still be al-Khaliq. He's not al-Khaliq by virtue of creating something. He's al-Khaliq whether he created anything or not. But you start to recognize, like, who is God? Man kana yu'minu billah, I gotta be in a place where I know who Allah is to the best of my ability, and that has evolution to it through reflection and contemplation. These are 4 steps you could take to start to build some of that out. When Yawm al-Akhir, you read the Quran, you read the Hadith, you read these verses and ayat that talk about what a day of judgment is, and start to recognize like where accountability is a value that this religion emphasizes in deep ways. And the society you live in does not. You basically get away with what you get away with if you have wealth and you have privilege. And if you don't, the systems just don't apply in the same ways. And that's not anything other than objective fact. You see? And you start to understand what a day of judgment is through who you understand Allah to be. Because you're going to stand in front of Allah on a day of judgment. May Allah grant us ease on that day. So when you understand that Allah is Al-Malik, 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 Malik Al-Mulk, what does this mean? And if I can really understand that, like, why am I giving anything else dominion over me? And it changes the experience of just how I live day to day. And if it's informing me, I should be a nicer person, not just to others, but to myself. I should be in a place where it inevitably makes these 3 things a little bit more easier, because it's being informed by something that then has it have a little bit more consistency. Does this make sense? So I don't know if we're going to meet next Monday because of MLK Day, if the building is closed or not. I just came back, and when I was away, at some point I just lost track of what day of the week that it was. And so getting over like some of these things. So literally this is the first time I came back to the IC, I think in like a week and a half or 2. It's really nice to be here. I definitely like miss this space and miss you all. I can't tell you that I don't love being in Medina, because I do. But if I had to be anywhere that's not Medina, it would be here. And we definitely carried all of you in our du'as and our prayers in this community, in our prayers and our du'as. Inshallah, Allah will accept it. But I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to this question of the building being open or not. But we'll put that out in the emails. We have all the other halakas that we would be doing regularly, other than Dr. Marwa's halakah. She's going to resume that next week. So the Wednesday Sira halakah that I do, that some of you come to, is not going to start at 7. That'll start at 6 also, because the building's closing at 8 right now until next week when the semester resumes for the spring. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I want us to do is just take a pause here so that we can make Isha before people have to leave. So people want to take a couple minutes to make wudu if you haven't. You can put chairs against the wall, and then we'll call the adhan, or I think it might have been called because people prayed it already. But we'll call the iqama in like 3 or 4 minutes. If people want to make their wudu and come, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Yeah, I don't know how to stop it, but Junaid is coming.